Yeah, I'll start the stream really soon. Okay. I should finally switch the themes. Gosh, I haven't streamed for like a couple weeks. This is what's my settings? Anyway, okay. I guess I should finally start the stream today. And let's talk about page performance. Switch to the live stream. Alright. Still the same background. Although the links are not as relevant anymore. Actually sold out on those 90% off offers. Although I still need to go through some of the customers. The Roblox SEO link though is still relevant. I think it will be part of one of the seasons coming up. Actually, I think I even have a topic for the SEO link and the IKEA sponsored background. That will probably be related to perhaps gamification or something. Could be one of the topics where I actually plug in the Roblox SEO course finally. Anyway, yeah, today's topic is page performance. I've already posted some posts on X mostly about what's relevant, what's important, but never really gone through in video, which I hope to also use some of the topics we talk about here today as something I can cover later in the videos as well, and just in a shorter format. I guess both from technical perspective and also from just holistic perspective about like what are the actual benefits, like what you should care about. It's just not just the page speed itself. I mean, even if you test it with this page speed insights, let's just test something. I can even test my my own newsletter page. I mean, actually, newsletter, it's not newsletter page, but my personal page to give you. Okay, I guess if it's not cached, it's probably not going to give you like high 80s, low 90s. I don't know when it was the last time I accessed my page. You also need to remember, like, when you're even testing for a web page performance, is that if you're sometimes if you're using like a cloud service as your website provider, yeah, here I get 70 on mobile right now. That's incredibly low. I get 100 on desktop, 70 on mobile. But what happens here is that what actually happened here is that when you use a cloud service to provide, like, to host your websites, let's say it's like Shopify or like maybe even Webflow, etc. They don't necessarily keep your website warm when no one else is accessing it. So if no one else is accessing it for a while, they're not returning a cached website to the first person who will just come to your page for whatever reason later. They'll actually take much longer to load the page. In this case, I assume what was taking a lot of time was render delay 5.4 seconds. Interesting. I should actually check how it. Now it's fast. Okay. I can retest it after a couple of minutes, and it usually will give you a higher score. Just because now it's going to be returning some cache data. So there are some of the page speed will be performing much better. And that's only relevant for like like for those websites that are not frequently used, and you might care about like 62. Even get worse. And it's only 97 on desktop. What's happening? I'm actually surprised. I'm surprised that my Shopify is killing my website now with the page speed, because that was that one post I posted. Where is it? Where is it? I think it was this one. I even yeah. Okay. Anyway, I posted this one where I was testing my newsletter page, and I got 100% 100 on mobile, right? And I was actually testing my page, and I was actually optimizing some of the things to get the 100. And now I'm testing the same page, and I'm getting 73. Now this is one of those completely random things that will happen to your site sometimes. Is first of all, if you're hosting it on a random cloud server, your response times from the server often will be different between different timings, like different time of the day. For example, if it's like a peak hours for traffic for that region, for example, or like whatever other servers are actually hosted on the same instance that your web page is hosted on, that usually will cause issues. The same it could be with your own private infrastructure if you use like a DigitalOcean droplet, and maybe what you're actually doing, like not even droplet, maybe you actually have dedicated server, but what you might be doing is that you have some background tasks running during specific times of the day, and when they are running, perhaps your websites actually get a little bit less resource allocation priority, for example, for CPU cycles, and you simply see worse performance on your website. And that's part of the reality, is that when I was testing it during that time, I actually was like, wow, my websites on mobile is, because even on desktop now I get, what's the oh, CLS is actually, even the CLS is not good right now. Let's check what's happening. Okay, so the LCP is below 25, which is the percentage it shares. So I'm losing a little bit on the. So I assume what's happening is, I don't actually know what is this from right now. Maybe I actually managed to mess it up. I might even go through it a little bit, because now I have cumulative layout shift, and what you actually can see there is you can actually go through show audit relevant to, and then go to CLS, for example, and it will find that this section for some reason is shifting a lot. That usually means that something above it is likely also moving around and causing it as it loads. I might be able to replicate that. A second. I might be able to replicate that without any. Oh, it just slides in as an animation. I don't see. Did I just enable transition animations for the elements? And that's the only reason why it's giving me CLS. I actually don't. I'm not even surprised to that actually be the reason. Sometimes that's one of those reasons, where one of those parts where you might not care about the. I will try to rerun this profiler locally as well, not just with the page speed insights. I'll see if it gives me a. It gave me Z. No, it didn't actually count it. Yeah, as it shouldn't count that. It's not actually counting that. So. Okay, I'm already trying. Now I'm just starting to roast my own website. And okay, so yeah, in Chrome there's actually this performance tab. There's also Lighthouse, where you can select like specific throttling configurations, but you can also use the performance tab in Chrome. And it's much better in the sense that it helps you understand, for example, LCP, which is the largest contentful paint. That's the time it takes essentially for the browser to complete like basically loading, rendering, and displaying the largest basically contentful paint, which will generally mean like the biggest element on the website above the fold. So once the biggest elements of the website basically have completed, like the most relevant, I guess Google would call it most relevant elements of the website have completed above the fold, it will essentially count that as complete. And in this case, it says, for example, here this performance tab, it's tested with my basically browser settings. I don't think there's any throttling set up. No. Anyway, but essentially it shows that LCP for me is 0.35 seconds, which is very different what you would see, for example, here, which says 4.8 seconds. That's because this device, this test was emulated on a Moto G Power 12. Moto G Power 12. If honestly, like, I don't even know what that is. Like, let's check what Moto G Power is. So it's this, something like this. I mean, honestly, when you look at this, you'd be like, yeah, good normal phone, right? But if you go to GSM Arena, it's 2020 phone. What I care about is actually checking. Yeah, it's 11 nanometers, 665 Snapdragon. So it's a pretty old processor. 11 nowadays the new devices are already running on like 3. I mean, Apple, I think iPhones, newest latest iPhones are like on 3 nanometers, and Androids would be like 4. I believe that's approximately the latest you would see on the 4 nanometers of process. So this is a relatively old already processor, and the video card is also GPUs. Like I think it's like an entry level for that budget device. So this is the device they basically tested on. Not fast. It has 4 gigabytes of RAM. So if you have some apps open, clearly gonna be a little bit slow. So that's what they tested on. And what they also do test is slow 4G throttling. What it used to be is they actually used to have 3G slow, and later I believe was 3G fast, and now it's actually 4G slow. That's actually becoming more realistic. So basically, Google, like, even though everyone's like, not everyone, so there are people who are complaining like this is unrealistic, incredibly unrealistic test. But when we actually saw, like, it was actually testing on this device, which is not actually that bad. Like, the device is not actually that bad anymore, and the slow 4G throttling, that's reasonable. That's actually reasonable even for like those people who live on like Wi-Fi, on the edge of the Wi-Fi range. Or perhaps they have a very, very, very. They actually have a lot of too many Wi-Fi's around them, like an apartment building, and they sometimes all live on the same channel for whatever reason. I've seen that as well. Although they are pretty smart nowadays with the routers there. I believe auto-selecting the channel that is not as congested, but I've seen like cases where you see, oh, there's multiple Wi-Fi's actually on the same channel, for example. It slows your network down. Like, it mostly causes those issues that you start dropping packets and stuff, and the experience just goes down the hill. So anyway, that is a part of the problem. So these are actually not bad settings. However, they usually do showcase some pretty bad results. And as you can see here, my LCP is 0.35 seconds if I just test locally. No throttle, nothing. While I would be testing here on the page here, I will actually get it like 5 seconds. And now that was funny because when I made that tweet, right, I actually get 100. That was the time apparently when the servers were here, largest content weight 1.9 seconds, speeding is 1.3 seconds, and now I'm getting 5.5 seconds, and speed index is 4.6. And the question you might actually ask is like, okay, so what's taking so long? It says render delay. Although I have not actually changed that render delay or anything. So I have another thing with this test sometimes is for some reason but the desktop it's 100. So I have that at least. But for some reason, sometimes when you're testing this the mobile test of PageSpeed, instead it also gives you like a different server. I've actually noticed that when the like in ecom, for example, you have a let's say you have a website in US and you have a different store, different website for EU, and you basically, if the user comes from the other region, you offer them a pop-up with a redirect, right? So there have been cases where a store is usually tested by Google Lighthouse on with a US based like crawler, basically US based test, and then occasionally it would just throw in for some reason a device from Europe, right? And the European device, for example, would see the pop-up with redirect, and that would actually like, for example, in some cases just destroys, for example, this cumulative layout shift because it suddenly just completely different element just appears on the screen. Um, Sometimes it also destroys a little bit of the. It just makes the largest contentful paint count like longer because suddenly the banner is already like the pop-up is already appearing early in the load cycle. So it actually, because you kind of either want to redirect the page people directly or you want to show the pop-up. Redirecting people is not actually even technically, I believe, fully legal, or at least like within all the regulations. Actually, you need, I think in some cases you actually need to offer them the pop-up with redirect to be completely compliant. Um, but yeah, but so but the case was that like they would showcase the patterns and that would ruin the score average for like the what you would call the field data. If I take some other site, for example, we can take a site where people were complaining about, for example, Instagram is failing the page speed insights, for example. Yeah, they are failing. That's what people were complaining about, that they're failing, right? And I think the thing is about websites like these large scale websites, like let's say Instagram, is that um, even if there is any impact on their SEO performance, even if this does have some like impact on SEO performance, and it supposedly does. There's a Google documentation that actually showcases that it is one of the signals. It's a small signal. There are some other studies, some basically relatively large scale studies from the like the field reports, basically of having tested a lot of websites, that there is like some correlation with between rankings and page speed, but that doesn't always mean that the page speed is what caused the higher rankings, but it might mean that it influenced the user experience metrics or directly also influence the Google rankings by simply being simply having better metrics. But it's not just this lighthouse score. Is actually also like bounce rate gets impacted by the page speed. Then you also have then you also have like sometimes perhaps the sessions are longer if your website is snappier because people actually are willing to wait for every single page to load. Um, yeah, I should also start writing some things down. I want to just put the things I was thinking about out, so perhaps later I can actually, I guess, wrap it up. Maybe even use AI um to make me like some kind of some kind of some kind of summary that of the points I can actually include in a video, for example. So for websites like Instagram, it's completely fine to fail because there's no competition really for them. In this case, for example, they don't really have competitors because it's Instagram. People know exactly what they're browsing for if they're browsing for Instagram. So they will be just they will anyway go to this site, so that doesn't impact their SEO performance. That's like one of those things people I think people misunderstand, that like, oh no, but everyone's failing. No, you're not actually. Everyone's not failing. Like you could have. I don't know what site. Obviously, my site wouldn't be failing it, but if I would take, let's say, what a random site I could actually pick up right now, but with competitors. Because not every site will obviously be failing it. Because I could go through one specific site, but I'm wondering what else I could. I could actually go through some niche sites. I wanted to check what actually it showed me. And yeah, this performance tab is actually really good for the. It also shows like time to first byte. This is your server response. Resource load delay. That's usually whatever there's like this delay for render blocking resources, which might be like some kind of fonts and scripts that are not actually don't have like deferred loading. There's a time where it's blocked, and then it's also loading, so it's also gonna be and then there's element render delay, so that's the rendering time in the middle. As you can see, render usually takes most of the time, but there's some specific key instances when the resource load takes a long time, and you really want to avoid things you can actually change, which is the things that you can reliably change is actually this time to first byte, which is your server response. If you use like some cloud platform, you might not always be in control. Just like I'm not currently in control, that Shopify seems to, for example, load my site slightly slower. And it might not be just by the Shopify is loading it slower. It could also be that this robot that's actually crawling my site and testing it, it's also working slower. That's completely possible, for the record. But it will show like 70 score, although I got one. Oh no! Speed is back to normal. Now, what this this is one of those things why I generally consider this. I even mentioned that in my posts on Twitter. Is that this is like lottery, right? You don't want to always test and rely on this score, because I was just showcasing you that I hit 70s multiple times in a row when I was testing. I was like, yeah, maybe it's cache. Okay, sometimes there's also a server issue that like it's loading from a different server. There's a chance my test has jumped to a different server right now. So now I get 99. Suddenly my largest contentful point is not 4.7 seconds, 5.7. And this is why I would trust, which is not available for my site because I don't have that many visitors. I have not advertised it. I do not have a blog post there yet, so I don't have enough data. But if I would, for example, let's do an e-commerce, because e-commerce stores usually fail. Let's do like something that's a popular e-commerce store like Gymshark, right? US checkout. That doesn't sound right. That does not sound right. That's no, I think this should be the page. Why does it saying client says redirect? Yeah, with an updated URL. What? Yeah, okay. So e-commerce stores often would fail, mainly because they have incredible amounts of I'll be able to showcase once it loads the diagnostics. I'll be able to show you like why they fail. But one of the reasons why e-commerce sites fail is they have a lot of analytics and like pixels, basically pixels for ads, like TikTok, Meta, or you could call it Facebook ads, Instagram ads. They would have Google Analytics with all kinds of like tag manager, perhaps tags and like events they are tracking and everything. And they might have like Microsoft Clarity or Hotjar for tracking like user actual sessions and seeing what they do on the site. They might be having some other tool for like A/B testing, and those all slow down the site for these metrics a lot. Actually, slows it down for real users a little bit as well, but mostly for first-time visitors. Like repeat visitors with cache have much better experience, but on the first load, you can often have this issue. Will it ever load this diagnose? Okay, it loaded. Yeah, it gave me 26 Lighthouse for them. Now it's 57 on desktop. Okay, so So we see this 14 second largest. If I loaded this with cache and I'm a repeat visitor right now, the site is actually pretty instant. Like the site rolls very fast. There's a little bit of movement around because of this. Okay, I guess I could just do this. And there's no. Oh, gosh. Yeah, I'm just gonna use US. Okay. So on repeat, yeah. Now the page, I selected the region. Page is no longer jumping. However, if I did not select the region, which these robots would also not do, it could jump around if it would load from a EU server. But because I open, like you can already see in this screenshot, it doesn't show me this row of confirming in my region because the robot was browsed now is searching it for like is actually accessing the site from a US server. So they don't see that. But if it was from Europe, it would have the same issue as I just saw by the website jumping up and down. And the only reason why it's jumping up and down is because of that regional, not a pop-up, but a banner at the top. That's how it works. And that can impact your but your score. It can also impact your field data, which I have not touched on yet because I wanted to touch on this topic a little bit later, but I did not touch on it. That they could get this cumulative layout shift as a worse value. Like the cumulative layout shift, if I expand on it here, is this one. Avoid large layout shifts, for example. So that means avoiding this movement here. So there's something while it's loading that's jumping up and down a little bit. I assume it might be related to the announcement banner or the Gymshark app line showing up on mobile, which I didn't see on the desktop. Yeah, I don't see it on desktop. For example, one of these probably is moving around a bit. It usually doesn't show it very well. Yeah, there's some jumping, but basically this gives you, yeah, also a cookie banner. So cookie banner showing up considered as a layout shift because it showed up during the loading time. So these things, and they can see contribution of to the layout shift. And you can actually notice that when you combine these together, it actually doesn't add up sometimes to the full layout shift thing. What it's complaining is that the whole page was moving around up and well, wow, it's still loading the page, so something's still not. So they have even like a failed script load. So some script is just not completing the loading on as you open their site. Wow, it actually should. What's interesting for that is actually should check what's happening with the network tab. I'd actually like to see what's happening here. Oh, so it's a WebSocket for a live chat app for this. And it's not resolving, so it's constantly just pending. Now, this will not impact your page performance. However, it can be annoying for users user experience if a person feels like there's something still loading on desktop and they actually see the like it's like, oh yeah, it's still circling. They'll be like, oh, what is it? Like it's just a slightly bad annoyance for some users, like why is it still loading? Or like why is it always loading? And now it completed on this side when I opened the through there. Nice. Anyway, yeah, so if we go back to this, so this was the whole page was shifting a little bit in the beginning. What you actually what the problem here is because it doesn't give you like actually tells you CMS page, right? The whole page basically is moving. What you should expect is that there's some moving around of elements during the load time, which might involve actually a different element that pushed it down, or your tiling setup where this element's tiling applied to this element in CSS changes based on like the way some selective element styling is applied because like if one element is following another element and sometimes you actually apply like this conditional like CSS to elements and until that additional element is inserted in the DOM it, for example, wouldn't shift, but once you insert that element in the DOM, suddenly something on the page shifts, and you get like, and it tells you that this element, for example, shifted, is responsible for CLS because it did shift, but the CSS that actually caused it would be dependent on some other element. So it actually some other elements showing up on the page that moved this element around. That's actually something that happens when you can't figure out like why, for example, this report tells you that this element is giving you some kind of layout shift score increase, which lowers your score, but it might even be related to some other element that's above it, below it, wherever. Usually above it, obviously. It's usually like for most sites, especially in like the e-commerce category, just anything that's in the header banner, because you have this also sticky header, which means there's obviously a difference between when it's loaded and when it usually starts scrolling down. So there's like sometimes this transition between states, and as you load the page, it usually means that there's might be also slight movement of the header. But yeah, that's a CLS. The CLS is not their biggest problem. The biggest problem is, for example, total blocking time is incredibly 30%. I mean, it's 30%, right? I don't want to get it wrong again. Not again, but right now, it should showcase. Yes, this looks like 30%. Yeah, TBT was 30%. Total blocking time, 30% of the score. And here it says rendering script evaluation. So we go down and we check what's happening. So why? So, so they're using Next.js, I guess. And that means they're actually, looks like they have a perhaps also a very inefficient strategy of loading their Next.js app. Yeah, I'm not big in Next.js optimization, but it looks like there's a chance of their scripts being loaded. Perhaps, even though I mean, I don't see that many chunks though. I only see these because I know that I have dealt with some of this, like a spa flash, like JS framework optimization, and generally you want it to be just server side rendered and just basically generating the DOM for it, HTML, and then just returning the HTML, or you want it to even be static if where you can. Because in this case, for example, we see that it takes supposedly 3 seconds on mobile based on this to actually for CPU time, and 2 seconds is just on the script evaluation, which means parsing through the JavaScript file. And ideally, if you can, you would want to leave the main bundle file as small as possible, and then conditionally or defer the load of like other chunks. So basically, it would be essentially that would mean like the app has the scaffolding loaded in, and then you've like, I guess you could solve hydrate elements on the go. I'm probably not using the right terminology for this right now, but you would. But in this case, it seems that there is definitely a time it waits for loading the most of the bundle, and that's why you get worse performance for something like this mobile test with Lighthouse. Whether that's a real problem for user experience, mostly not, especially if it's already cached. So it's just that's more of a niche use case for like a first-time visitors. Now, where it does start to matter, like these kind of things, is actually when you're loading a website and it's the first-time visitor from an ad campaign where you're trying to reach more people. Now, in that case, if it's a first-time visitor and they actually have a slow experience loading your, for example, Next.js bundle for the first time, that could impact their willingness to stay around while the page is loading. They could close the page sometimes. Sure, they could close the page in loading time. You still pay the money in ads. And perhaps if you have a like similar issue in the tech, for example, I would say it's actually much worse because your CPCs are really higher than selling like something like I don't know, like joggers and hoodie. If you would be selling like services for let's say for like law, you would be selling some SaaS businesses in many categories, like not SaaS business, but you would be selling like a SaaS product, many categories. Wait, let me pour some water in. Um, yeah. So when you would be selling those kind of services, your CPCs would be incredibly high. And then actually having a slow website and running ads could matter a lot, because you could literally, you could on some people you could lose like couple dollars per click, and they just end up not waiting for the page to load. So you still spend those couple bucks on the ad click, but they didn't even load the page. So that increases your acquisition cost when you let's average out those couple people who quit. You still increase your overall ad cost per customer. All right. So, okay, so what else do we see? Okay, we see the Google Tag Manager. They have multiple tag scripts. Okay, so there's even a chance sometimes that there's like a same script loaded multiple times. That happens too. Sometimes you just include it multiple times and then you forget about it. Whether that's the reality in this case doesn't seem so. They Oh, oh yeah. I didn't even like. Why does my Twitch chat not loading up here? I don't even know when you guys left a message in the chat. Oh yes, yeah. I see Francesco and Miguel in the chat, but I'm like even like when did you guys leave the message room? Because I didn't see it. I now I see the chat on the screen. Like what the hell? But I didn't see it on the guys. Where did? Let's also turn the timestamps on for myself so I can actually see when the time was. Chat settings. Can I turn the timestamps on for myself at least? So you can also pay attention to. Where's the timestamps? Chat appearance maybe? Timestamps for new messages. 8. Oh gosh, Miguel. And even Francesco, that was like 20 minutes ago. Yeah. Jesus. No, I think news websites actually. I can try. I think news websites almost always fail. And for some reason, also my Streamlabs failed by not showing the Twitch messages. Now it shows the new messages on the Streamlabs as well, but until the moment I actually went to check, it was just not showing my messages. Interesting. Hey, you were wrong. Bloomberg is actually passing both on mobile and desktop. So take that, Peter Levels. It does. Not every single website fails. Even not, even not the big ones. Sorry, bruh. Maybe you are taking that penalty after all. Yeah, I think yours was failing. I was not planning to like do the roast right now, even though I probably should. Maybe you can actually go through yours since you're here. I was not planning necessarily to go through the roasts right now, but maybe I will go through your roast because I did check. I think I just opened it once and I saw whether you were failing or not, and I believe yours was failing. Yeah. Okay, so Bloomberg actually has it. Uh, I don't know even how their website looks like if I would just open it. Let's just check. Okay. Oh, oof. So it loads this and then it gives me a big ad. Nice. I mean, at least it's their own ad, like Bloomberg Originals, at least. At least they're not showing some random, Yeah. So yeah, their website, wow, that ad sliding away like this, it creeps me out sometimes. Just this guy's face just randomly popping in and out of my peripheral vision. Yeah, that now one thing there is already like if your slash Europe fails, one thing already there is that first of all, if it's testing with a US robot, the European performance will by default be slightly slower. That just if there's an actual European page that is hosted differently, because you could still sometimes because unlike the configs they could be setting up, there's some really weird stuff you could be setting up. However, okay, we can actually take a difference. What exactly is different between the I mean, I'm gonna. Gosh, I'm just page speed web dev. Like, what am I opening? This is just. Um, I wanted to just Google it, not open some random. Yeah, so I'm gonna take this. I'm gonna check like actual main differences between these. Because yeah, that's this also like slash Europe failing and the default page not failing. This is also a classic issue for websites where one path might not be failing. Or for example, you have a homepage, you just check your landing page because what most people do now, the core web vitals obviously is the most important, but some people check their scores or like the actual Lighthouse scores on one side. Like let's say they check on a homepage, but they do not check on their like different type of pages. Maybe those are like category pages, like a specific landing pages. There might be blog post pages. Like they don't check on that different type of resource page on their website, and those resource pages might actually have an incredibly bad user experience. Now they might be like, oh yeah, I'm just failing for Web Vitals, but my homepage is actually pretty good on score. Like, oh no, my homepage actually has a really good score. They be like it's 90s or something, maybe like really good. And be like, why is it failing? Like, clearly not my website that's wrong. It's Google that's wrong because my website's failing. But what you might not realize that this is for real. This Core Web Vitals assessment is for real users. And there's a chance that most of your users don't go to the homepage, for example, but most of them actually go through SEO to blog posts. So most of this traffic for Core Web Vitals assessment for load time would actually be evaluated based on a blog post. And most of the users would see these metrics evaluated first based on those blog posts. And if those blog posts are bad experience, and that will be your primary acquisition channel for traffic, you could fail the Core Web Vitals assessment while at the same time having a really well performing homepage. Yes, that's actually something I wanted to also mention in a post. So talking more about specific values in the Core Web Vitals is that, as Miguel you just mentioned, um, the best thing about the Google Search Console is that it also groups up the pages based on like specific similarity attributes that Google considers similar, and that means usually they would split apart blog posts. They would split apart, let's say, some kind of category or content hub pages that you have in the middle. They would separate separately um, the homepage, and you would actually see based on each group, like which group is having like this specific issue. That is actually a really good way to check your Core Web Vitals assessment per category page, indeed. And it gives you specific URLs that fail, yeah, because sometimes not the whole group fails, only part of the URL, like partial failure, because maybe those URLs have more images, or maybe you have applied like some specific logic for that selection of URLs. that's actually true. That would be a really good option for you to check is the Google Search Console. Okay, so what we have with the Bloomberg here is it has a good score here in Europe. In Europe, what we have an issue with is wait, this is mobile, this is desktop. Okay, failed. So yeah, largest contentful fail. Time to first byte. Oh, okay. So what's interesting we see here is that like time to first byte in Europe is 1.3 seconds, while time to first byte on the homepage is 0.4 seconds. So you could already make an assumption that because this is specifically the time to first byte, and I just clicked on this time to first byte and it leads to documentation. So time to first byte is this process of basically it starts counting it here about where basically starts all the redirects, initializing service workers, HTTP cache, DNS resolution. Then the request starts. So the here would actually everything that needs to be fetched by the browser when they're checking the site, and then they also resolving DNS and everything. Yeah. Um. Yeah. Buy me go. So they're resolving everything. Now they're actually starting to process the response, the request, then the response, and that's basically the resource timing, where the first byte of that response starts to come in. That's considered the response, like that response timing for the first byte. So in this case, all this process, now what could be happening here is that a European URL for some reason doesn't have additional caching mechanisms that the main website has because they are optimized that the index page should return as quickly as possible. I can quickly try to test that if that is true. So this is the main US page. And I can check the European page as well. I want to, gosh, I should have split screen this, but okay. Okay, they actually are. What is this? Yeah, literally everything is higher in terms of not everything, but actually all the script evaluation and the style and layout, everything is higher here. So there's even a different logic for the European side. Reduce JavaScript execution time. So we go here and we get like business week with the B player asset. Okay, it's like if I would drag this out like this, you would actually notice that there is a difference between the URLs, but CPU time on the EU is actually lower for this because they have a additional player being loaded on this. However, the first party load for Europe is even lower. So where are we actually getting this times? It doesn't seem to be on the script side, although it does appear to take a long time because this is European on the left side. Okay. And while sitting and thinking about this, I have completely realized that. Okay, I'll set these two things side by side a little bit better. So here we have US Bloomberg and European side of the Bloomberg. And what Miguel initially brought up is that European version is failing Core Web Vitals assessment. US version is not. If you actually look at it, to be like, okay, so I even just went down to the scripts and I was like, European version actually loads scripts faster than the US version. So why is something happening? Because clearly but when you look at this time to first byte, what you will actually now need to think about is that I looked at the scripts because when you go to these things and you start looking here, it's just telling you, yeah, the main thread work is bad, like they reduced the impact of the JavaScript and everything. But what you actually realize there is that although it passed an audit, wait, can I get this? What actually happened here is that when real users accessing this page, time to first byte, just as I showed on documentation, it's a resource timing until the first byte of the response comes back. So it's all the DNS resolution, it's access to the server, basically request time to the server, which you would call ping in many cases, like video games or just like basically how quickly the server responds to your request. Those milliseconds, when accessing it from the US, which most people that access Bloomberg.com probably are doing, they would have very fast load times for this because the servers are probably all located in the US, and there's a chance that Bloomberg doesn't have European servers for /Europe. It should make sense. They're not doing it like eu.bloomberg.com. It's bloomberg.com/Europe. But if people actually save them as bookmarks on the /Europe, for example, and then they access Bloomberg that way, their request would resolve slower. So this field data, discover what real users are experiencing, it will fail, for example, because this time to first byte will impact the largest contentful paint. You could actually, when you look at this time to first byte, you could think of it as a sub unit of the largest contentful paint, because for your browser to render the basically the most important elements to the site above the fold, they would need to obviously have this time to first byte complete, and then they would need to also finish the whole response, and then they would need to parse everything. So if there's like a 1 second difference between this Bloomberg US site and European site, it basically pushes up this largest contentful paint almost by a second. You can see 0.4, 1.4. So there's a 1.1 second difference. 1.3, 2.2. So there's 0.9% difference. So actually, the European side loaded by 0.2 seconds faster than the US side after that first byte has been received. And I already explained that when I went to these scripts and when I told people told us to compare it, right? Here, if you actually check on the EU side, the scripts are actually loading faster. Script relation 8 seconds. Here it's 10 seconds. Rendering is 2.6 seconds. And here it's only 146 milliseconds. So the test actually showcases that the European European version of the site, or the European news site, whatever you call it, it's not a different site. It's the same site, just the /Europe. It's actually loading faster scripts-wise. But the reason why European side is failing is specifically this one figure, which is called time to first byte. It's because your requests from Europe are taking longer to resolve. It's unlikely to be slower internet than US, which is not true for Europe. It's unlikely to be it's actually even unlikely to be slower devices in general, because honestly, yeah, maybe European devices are a little bit slower because in US people perhaps might be on the latest iPhones and Macs. more often than not. And in Europe, you would have like slower Windows laptops, and Windows sometimes can be slow especially if misconfigured. So you could make an argument that perhaps devices slower in Europe. You could make an argument about devices the internet should not be slower. So there's some relative impact from that as well. However, one thing here that definitely is playing a role, because Europeans do still load the site faster by 0.2 seconds, is that it's most likely just the request resolution, because the servers are in the US, and perhaps Bloomberg has not actually focused as much on optimizing that. One way, obviously, where people optimize that is they have all these edge locations in all the different regions, and they're just returning this first response from the edge point. So basically, like a closed server to the user. For me, that would be, for example, AWS server in Stockholm would be a very low latency. Probably could get it down like 15-20 milliseconds just for like the uh, not for the time to first byte, but just for the resolving the request. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. This actually a point I wanted to talk about. Now, actually, already like because I went over this, I can actually use this later for video. It's actually a very important point for me to remember to go through the video. Is this time to first byte and how it relates to the LCP, largest contentful pane, and how it relates to a same website with different, for example, subpaths failing while you feel like it's actually loading faster, but it's still failing. It's actually because this real user data relies on the fact that users in a different region might have slow resolve times for the requests just because of server being too far away, or like being some bad optimization on the infrastructure part where you're actually somehow throttling users from a different region, which I've seen. Because I know in Europe sometimes I can't access some sites in the US nowadays because they'd be like, I just don't want, we don't want to deal with it, because maybe they don't want to care about the GDPR compliance and whatnot, and they don't care about European users because, well, it's US centric and US focused site. So it's not just content, like paid content, it's also like news sites. I see that quite frequently. So there's a chance that sometimes you have some middle step there where you're checking for something, and you're basically end up throttling the request time for the user from a different region, and that actually leads to this page failing, for example. And in theory, that would mean that there could be like a small impact on this ranking on Google, for example, between other news sites. Although these high profile sites, it's mainly they mainly rank based on their brands, just brands, pure brand strength. So this performance is like a very minor factor, but it could technically be like a deciding factor for this sub page for Europe, for example, for people browsing European news, ranking lower than some other sites, just because this is failing. That could be an argument you could make. And I already explained you, for example, that I would consider to be the main reason. It's literally this. And if you would go through this audit and you would be focusing on these, like, yeah, implement this, minimize the thread work, reduce the JavaScript, you'd completely miss the point that it's not the problem. It's just this. Real users just don't get to that response, the first byte of the response, as quickly as these who browse the main page, because the 0.9 per seconds go directly into this LCP, which is a core metric for core web vitals. Time to first byte is not, by the way. These three are. So this is one of them, and this 1.3 seconds is part of the 2.2 seconds, as I already explained before. So that is literally the main reason, and they don't even have LCP failing, by the way, but they only have this interaction to next pane failing, which is pretty close in the US as well. But because this is slow, it usually means that this is also slower because the browser is already testing for your responsiveness, but you're still loading something in the background during that time, and just the response is not as quick. It's completely normal that these two also kind of are a little bit tied together, especially when this one's a little bit slow than this one. This one also sees a little bit higher value usually because while Google is evaluating, you have some additional background scripts loading in, and your clicks are not as responsive. And not just clicks, but also the page is not as responsive while those additional processes in the background are happening with loading some kind of analytics and etc. That's why, because there was another figure that used to be like first input delay was one of the metrics they were using for this, and that had the same issue. This one's a little bit better metric, but it suffers from the same issue with slower loading pages. But yeah, I think I have provided Miguel the answer why his Bloomberg assessment has happened and how it has happened. And I'll actually do a content piece on this, probably a video on. Might even use this as an example, actually, in a way. It's not a bad example. Because this site actually clearly showcases very clear distinction between this for the US users and this for the EU users. All right, let's get to the next chatter. I have another chatter that I just completely forgot, but it was this. It was the Francesco's ads for makers.com. So I'm gonna, drag it back. Drag it back. I haven't written anything here, but maybe I will later. Oops, no. But I wish it would actually show me the chatters though. Somehow Streamlabs did betray me today. Not very happy about it. All right, ads for makers. Best practices 96. Browser errors logged to the console. Not gonna make it. Fail to fetch remote config from PostHog. You're trying to track me and you're even failing at doing that. Yeah, I don't know. Shame on you, I guess. You failed to track me. How you have a cross origin policy issue with loading a config. Interesting. Actually didn't expect them to fail, but yeah, so he failed to track me. I'm actually happy you failed to track me. Okay. Anyway, that's not even performance, just best practices. Okay, so your performance. Okay, so score pretty low. I mean, it's not low, it's just average. Speed index 5 seconds. So I don't see anything for these first screens, so you're really not gonna make it, I guess. But time to first byte. Time to first byte 600 milliseconds. Can you make this 200 milliseconds? Yeah, like if you can make this 200 milliseconds, that would be great. I'll check what desktop says. 83. Oh, in your desktop is honestly not that great. It's a little bit. Yeah, this is 40 milliseconds on the desktop, so that's fine. But on a mobile, it still says 600. I mean, even for the root document, it was fixed fine, but here it's 610 milliseconds. I guess that's one of the issues you have. It's like you would like the time to the first byte to be somewhere like in 2 millisecond range. As it still would be ideal if you can keep it in 2 millisecond range. That usually means just fast server response. And that depends whether you're self-hosting or not self-hosting. If you're self-hosting, it usually will be better. You're not usually, gosh, if you're hosting on some cloud service, it usually will be better unless it's like some really bad indies. Indies, I don't want to say bad indie service. It's actually can be also like all kinds of corporate solutions can be slow with that too. But some of the indie solutions have pretty bad because they're hosting on their own servers, and sometimes they haven't focused on optimizing the response time, like one for the first visitor, for example, and they're like time to first byte for quite slow, because they're not also caching the request, like caching the responses for people. So that's how if you're self-hosting, this is something you sometimes end up having a little bit slower. And that's not a huge issue. Like if you have only like not that many users, it's not a huge issue at all. It's just like one thing you might want to sometimes optimize that is within your control, because I already made that Bloomberg example with your audience. The time to first byte is usually within your control, depending on the choice of infrastructure, like where you host your service, how you optimize your database queries, how you optimize your like server-side rendering, or how you optimize your cache. All that goes into this time to first byte, and this is usually within your control, even if that means like what platform you choose. It's within your control. Now the rendering part, how fast it will render on your audience's browsers and devices, you don't really know. It's not within your control. But that time to first byte part, which was also the case, which made them fail for Europe on Bloomberg, that's within your control. You can, like Bloomberg, absolutely theoretically could probably use some kind of cached edge location responses from European server for /Europe. It's probably possible. Whether it's worth the investment, who knows? But it's probably possible, and probably would improve the European experience quite a lot by shaving off that 1 second, for example, of the request time that it took more than in the US. Yeah, some CSS file. But that's I mean, so this. I assume the reason why it's complaining is because it's blocking the first pane, so it's being loaded probably pretty early in the site. I normally wouldn't say there's much to optimize here, because deferring it would usually mean that your site like design changes. Well, now with the way people optimize it, they really care about like on scale, is that they would actually split aside from this JavaScript, gosh, this CSS, from this CSS file, they would take out parts that are 100% necessary for that above paint, um, above the fold, above the fold, first screen you see on the website when you go on the website. Let me show you. When you go to this website, so what you see here, this above the fold, this is what you see right as you load. So what they would do with that script file is they would say that take that above the fold part of these stylings out. They would actually sometimes inline it in the header of the site or the page. So inline is better than loading a script separately, because the script loading is actually technically render blocking. Inline will be parsed. It's blocking, but it's parsed right away. But the script loading is actually render blocking additional time until it resolves the request and everything. So that would take whatever it takes to render this above the fold. They would take that CSS out of this. They might even inline it in the header. And then the rest will go into the CSS file that is actually deferred. So the CSS is actually deferred until the main thread for the browser clears up. So you actually load the rest of the CSS later because people will actually load on this first. So you don't actually need it to load right directly. There's whatever loads here, you could in theory defer the scripts, the CSS, even JavaScript. So that way, if you would do that, for example, and it would be possible. It's not always possible because sometimes you need to like this framework related a lot of template like for whatever it is, whether you use like old school bootstrap, whether you use the what the hell am I, how did I even forgot the name of the framework? How could I forget the name of the framework? I'm seriously like, I forgot about Tailwind. Yeah, I seriously in a moment just forgot how Tailwind what about Tailwind. I was like, what is that? I know there's like people usually use like yeah, it's Tailwind obviously. Because they used to use Bootstrap, so I remember that was like, oh yeah, but they replaced Bootstrap with, and then I was like couldn't like remember it's like the name of the gosh, it's Tailwind. Probably have not slept enough. Anyway, they would use Tailwind. But obviously, you have those classes that you might use for the whole site. So, but even for these 5 kilobytes, sometimes it's better to inline 5 kilobytes if it's just one landing page rather than do a script. It will just take less milliseconds to parse the whole inline script than it will for it to load the file and then parse it. Like by inline, I mean you just include the style tags in HTML and then you just drop it there. 5 kilobyte file. I mean, you could actually do it even with a 5 kilobyte file. You could just do an inline. Actually, I'm gonna message you. Is this thing very critical? No, but this is the optimization you would want to do if you cared about it. And it would actually be relevant for you, for example, failing some kind of user metric. Because you also currently don't have the reporting for the real users because, well, we don't have that many real users on our casual sites that we, I guess, don't advertise as much yet. Um, okay, so JavaScript, obviously you will have the GTM and the Google tag. Now I do have a feeling that you're loading the same script here. It has the same size, 33.1 kilobytes. I have a feeling that you don't actually need both of those G tag. You only need one of them. I have a feeling you could avoid parsing additional 133 kilobytes of JS. These are just the chunks for your React. Yeah, like whether it's possible to defer them or it's relevant to defer them. Good question. There are some optimization potential available. Post hog, well, it's currently not working for you because it's failing course, I guess. Maybe it is working, but something was failing. So maybe it's irrelevant in this very moment. But if you're gonna use these analytics, as I showed you, this one here at the top, and these are usually one of the things that slow those metrics down for mobile. And does impact on the first load. It does actually impact user experience. And of course, you have Facebook events as well. I mean, you could be running ads later, so I understand why you have them. This is common in e-commerce as well. You load these scripts. Now, what the real impact of them is, a couple milliseconds on mobile for LCP usually. couple hundred milliseconds. That would be remove duplicate modules. Are you loading different versions of? Oh, that's post hoc doing that. Technically, it is loading different versions of the same script, I think. Now, there might be some kind of browser compatibility thing why they're doing that, but there seems to appear that there's indeed dual version load. Does PostHog always do that? Load two different versions? I need to go to your site. I actually want to see what's happening with that network tab. I want to see what's happening. Why is it? Does it actually load two versions? No, it doesn't. Well, it does for Web Vitals. It does load two different versions for Web Vitals, but it doesn't load it for the recorder.js. I need to clear. Oops. I need to clear it up. I want to see what happened there. And I want to see what happened when it loaded. Ah! Yo! Yo, what? I just wanted to pull that one apart. So it does load two different versions of this, but okay, I want to see all the JS files that are loaded here. So this one, Web Vitals, this version is loaded from this script. Which looks like is one of your chunks for React app. And this is loaded from external scripts loader from PastHog itself. So maybe it does load. Oh, but it actually just adds like it just adds two different versions on its own. I mean that's what you actually do. Technically, this is what you are doing. You're actually repeating because this is in your DOM. So you are the one who's actually loading these scripts this way. You actually even repeat of loading the dead clicks auto capture twice. I assume this in the DOM is actually because. Oh yeah, you lost a little bit. Yeah, I'm just I was talking about. Yeah, I can. Yeah, I can. Yeah, of course it's bad because you're even including the same script twice. One like just one next to each other. You just like copy Control C, Control V, right? Just copy it multiple times. But on a more serious note, it's your performance actually not that bad. I can even go over and tell you one more thing that was like in this time to first byte, which is basically the time browser takes to resolve the request DNS and basically resolve the request DNS check, cache, everything. That's the one thing you can obviously optimize. That's within your control, whether you based on a platform you choose to host on. It's dependent on the on your caching mechanisms. It depends on how quickly you resolve some kind of database requests. It's dependent on how you deliver your web app to the user, whether that's server-side render, whether that's static, whether that's dynamic with a SPA. That's one of those things about this 600 milliseconds is that ideally you would have it within like 200 milliseconds. And this is dependent, actually, as I said, on the hosting platform, on how you optimize your server-side code, how you deliver the size of your app that's delivered in the bundle. It might impact that timing because the static files, if it would be just static HTML file, you could return it right away. So that time to first byte would actually be very fast from even if it was your server or whether it was edge location on a cloud, that would be fast. Like 600 feels like a little bit long, that because I think ideal is like Google tells you ideal is 200 milliseconds that you'll be returning it. What do we see on the desktop? I only actually wanted to see you actually had a really good metrics here. It wasn't that bad. I mean, on desktop, the metrics were actually pretty damn fine. You could say they're pretty fine on desktop. I wanted to, which one was I even checking? Oh yeah, on desktop you have the time to first byte in 160 seconds, which is fine. Yeah, that could actually be true because I think I saw it before in the. Well, I mean, your images are WebP, so at least they're. And it's not actually complaining about you not gzipping, is it? I could check in the browser. Where was my website on your? Oh yeah, that was, and the one thing where I was actually talking about on mobile was because you had this CSS file which says potential savings for render blocking 160 milliseconds. And then you click this and it's this CSS file. I said that when you care about this performance of the first, like returning for the first byte, this 5 kilobyte, for example, CSS file could literally be inlined and you would actually get so much more savings on this because it takes way more time to resolve. For the first time visit, it takes to resolve like a file and retrieve a CSS file and resolve it. Like, so you can actually save it by generally just inlining the whole CSS in like a style tag. Technically, it solves that problem. And if you have like a simple website where basically you have like one page or maybe like a couple pages, but here in this case you actually have like one main page, and people will not actually be benefiting much from caching those resources. You could just inline that, and that actually saves time on the load. But another thing I said that is technically a better optimization than inlining the whole file, because at some point you don't want to like inline like large CSS files. But is that when you see this above the fold part, if you can separate, like chunk it, you could call it tree shake, whatever, and just select only CSS relevant for what's above the fold, which is this, what you have here, the text here, header, and this my books part. If you could isolate that CSS, you could actually inline only above the fold CSS, and then keep the rest of the CSS in a CSS file, or you can even keep the CSS file the same and literally have duplicate CSS because it will just reapply the same tags. Nothing on the site will change. So you could even but ideally you would obviously extract the CSS, but you could leave the file theoretically the same and defer the loading of that CSS file because you don't actually care how this part of the page CSS loads, for example, for the elements below this or the footer, because they can load asynchronously, and when people will start scrolling down, by that time they will usually already be loaded. So that way you technically save on that script evaluation and load time, which is render blocking. You save time on that, and then you still get the rest loaded later. and that's usually will be before people even start scrolling down. That's like the technically the best optimization is when you split the above the fold CSS separately, inline that, and then the other CSS goes in a CSS file, and it's just loaded with a defer, like a defer tag or etc. Just basically with a delayed. That improves the load time specifically for like the first time visitors, visitors that are coming in on page and their respective experience of seeing like the first above the fold, the so-called large contentful faint based on the Google metrics. That's like the ideal way to optimize that part. Ideal way from the performance part. With a 5 kilobyte CSS file, ideal might even be just inlining the whole 5 kilobytes of CSS. Like there's obviously work that needs to be involved in splitting separately, for example, parts of CSS. And when you use Tailwind or whatever, there are classes that are shared. So the actual savings of splitting in two parts might not actually be that big. So instead, you might just include the whole 5 kilobytes in a style tag somewhere early in the page. So you just load it right. So when the actual HTML is rendered, you already see the page correctly with correct styling. That's like that. That's just the optimization I picked up on this one because it's like a very small optimization for performance for you, but for someone else that might actually mean way more because they might be loading like a huge 66 kilobyte CSS file up front, and in the end it might actually be that you are render blocking for like 300 milliseconds. Well, you could just take out like 5 kilobytes of CSS, get it above the fold ready with inline, and you would defer the rest of the script loading and it would not be render blocking. That's like the that's just general advice for people. It's not actually that like it's not super relevant to your site, but it's actually one thing that's currently is losing you like 100 milliseconds or something. But the time to first byte is actually what I would say is a little bit more critical for you. It's still not a bad metric. Like 600 is not bad. If you'd be reaching into like 1 second, that would be considered bad. 600 is just, that would call, as Google calls it, needs improvement. 200 would be great though. And yeah, if you're still here, also because there's G tags with 133.1 kilobyte, and there's another G tag JS with the same size, and I think it's the same ID. Oh, this is the this is the add one. Yeah, you basically have the two scripts for the G tag with the same size, which I assume there's a chance they are the same, right? But yeah, the post hog, there was an error for the post hog. There was also an error in the console for the post hog. I don't know if you've seen it, if you skipped or maybe you rolled back, but if you skipped or not, there was an error for the post hog in the console because I saw it that you were getting 96 score on best practices, and I was like, why? And it says fail to fetch remote config for post hog, and you have a cross origin error. So the response must not be wildcard. Okay, so basically you don't have cores for this request configured correctly, I guess, if I get it right. So it might not even be loading it correctly. I don't know if it's not loading a specific part of post hog, or it's failing for the. It's only a chunk supposedly, but I'm not entirely sure whether that's the main chunk or not. I mean, you know better whether your post hoc is working or not, but something's failing for the cross origin request. Okay, if we go over this, do we see anything else that you're... Okay, I'm gonna just run now the performance test in the browser. I will take your website, mobile version. I'll check it in the browser in my own, like in my own browser. And I think we'll see what's up. I mean, LCP is fine. 0.27 seconds, no issues. Time to first byte 19. It was 52 milliseconds for me, which is for a desktop user with a decent machine. No problem. My time to first byte is actually 52 milliseconds, so your server was responding fast. It was responding slowly to that one because I guess it was network conditions. You also have 1 gigabit internet, so there might have been some networking problem. Oh yeah, because it's also requesting from probably checking your site from a US server. Although it's relevant for real users, and if you're hosting on Hetzner, which I assume is a German server or Helsinki. I mean, like what was it? It was Helsinki server, and what was the European server? Frankfurt? I forgot already. Berlin? Nuremberg, I guess, and Falkenstein. Okay, I actually don't even... I kind of know where they are on the map, but not it's that relevant right now, but yeah. Resource load duration, so that's actual resources being loaded. So that includes the WebP images. But those are above the fold. For mobile, they're not, but technically those images were above the fold, so... Wait, no, not all of them are above the fold, right? The masterclass and stuff. You could actually defer loading the images that are not above the fold to later, because here you have the Facebook masterclass and the masterclass images. You have the masterclass images. You could actually defer any images that are below the fold from loading right away. That's probably all this image, the newsletter image, and the masterclass, because above the fold for desktop and mobile, you will most likely be... Oh god. If I close it, you'll see it. You most like... I mean, maybe the masterclass because I'm actually sitting on a... I will open it on the other screen just so I can actually see how other people might see it, because currently I'm streaming for the 180p resolution. Oh no, the latest video images will usually not show up on the screen for most resolutions, so I believe you could actually defer loading those images. That would speed it up a little bit more. That's like a super optimization strategy, but it's relevant for a lot of people actually. Like if you want to optimize, you can defer any below the fold images, and it's not always the best idea because sometimes you want to load them faster just because people sometimes scroll down very fast. There are some, and if you have a lot of resources that you're deferring that way, then you might actually want to go a little bit, extend it a little bit to the resources you load above the fold, so they're not competing like later in the queue who actually gets to appear on the page or not, and they are basically downloaded on a slower network in the not the perfect order. But yeah, I would say you could delay that, improve performance a little bit. Not the best optimization for anyone caring or like just wanting to get things done fast, but it's what you could do. Yeah, the post hoc, I'm not entirely sure. There's like multiple versions and multiple scripts being loaded all at once. The analytics, there was some question about maybe those Google Google tags potentially loaded twice with the same script. Potentially, there's a possibility. And I went over the other parts. Oh gosh, this was not your side. I believe I actually didn't like. Otherwise, your performance is pretty damn good. Not that much on the page, just like for mine. Don't actually have that much on the page, so there's not as much to worry about. Oh yeah, another thing it's complaining about is that you don't have the. This is the opposite of what I said, that you could defer the elements that are below the fold. It doesn't have the for the fetch priority equals high tag applied to the elements that are above the fold, which is that Google Ads quick start guide. And that's on mobile. On desktop, you would actually have both of the books. So this Facebook coming soon and the Google Ads, they would both basically deserve to have also the fetch priority fast, like a high priority. This is actually what the Google itself recommends. Like I personally also don't include these as often, but it's actually something that is within the standard. I mean, not within the standard, but it's standard for Google Chrome, so you can include those for other browsers as well. Maybe not for every browser, but I think most modern browsers are already starting to move towards this as well. So that's a way for you to simply guarantee that those resources are picked first in the priority. Okay, the render blocking requests, the only one is actually the CSS file, which you could inline, avoid the render blocking. It will still be taking that slight blocking time by blocking the parsing part, but it would avoid the render block while it's loading. Because you can see that it actually goes in a queue like this. I'll pull it here. It will first take your CSS file and then it will load the OTF, so the font file, right? So and it only can start loading the font file after it has parsed this script. But if you did not have a request here, and we can see a network request for your CSS file here, actually you can't see it because I need to lift it up like this. Um, request sent and waiting. So the download for me was fast, 3 milliseconds, but the queuing and connecting and the request sent and waiting was 150 milliseconds. That is the time you wasted by having that CSS file as a separate file instead of inline. And that basically delayed the loading of the font by that time. And then whatever other resources that are loaded from the CSS file. Well, your page is quite minimalistic, so there's actually nothing else. But it's the font that's got delayed, so technically they don't experience the site as quickly as they could in all of its beauty. But that essentially delays also the other processes with JavaScript starting, because it kind of takes all the download, everything parsed, and then they move on to this part. Oh yeah, there was another one. There was another font, right? Font file. But yeah, there's some render blocking that could be saved. Not super important, not super relevant for you specifically, but relevant for an average person who thinks about optimizing these things, you should look into it. Hmm. All right. Oh wow, I've been live for almost 2 hours, haven't I? 1:45. That should even probably be enough for today. I got some ideas for the content I can switch for video. Actually, that time to first byte. The Bloomberg example might actually be something I go with to explain, and also looking at Francesco's site gave me an idea for the for mentioning also the CSS optimization strategies and also reviewing your script sometimes being repeated twice. Oops. Anyway, yeah, I think I should wrap up for today. We'll be back tomorrow. I'll have more scheduled content tomorrow. I might go with the two roasts I promised, which is the Miguel site and then I believe Garrett's site. I might go with those two roasts tomorrow. I might switch it up and actually do a different type of review of specific points and how to optimize just specific points, like as in they are in the just go like point by point optimization for like large contentful paint with uh CLS. And I just do like this because today I was a little bit more improvising. Although I had some content planned on how I want to approach it. Today's live stream was a little bit not scheduled in all the ways. That's why I even started later. I was a little bit, my mind was a little bit off the topic, so I didn't like sit right before the live stream and like kind of go over exactly what I want to cover. But I did find actually multiple topics to go over. I also showcased how it's like just like playing a roulette sometimes with Google PageSpeed Insights, where I was checking on my side that I got to 100 once, and I even shared it on like a post on X. But then later, when I was checking my site, it suddenly was getting 70s, and that brought me to the point where sometimes it's a slower server response. Sometimes it's lack of caching if your site has not been accessed for a while, and something like Shopify doesn't return a cached version. Then other times it's actually the fact that the Google robot might actually be checking your site from a different region. Again, 71. I'm getting 71 on my page again, and you can actually see that it's not the total blocking time. It's not the cumulative layout shit. It's actually giving me a really bad score for LCP, only 3 points. It's telling me that the large contentful fight is very slow. Now, for some reason, it's saying, and now, yes, I could have always removed these PayPal buttons and everything, the PayPal scripts, but I was doing the optimization without removing any functionality. Technically, I do not need to load these for mostly anything except product pages. Now, the optimization on Shopify with that is a little bit worse, but I can't optimize that. I mean, I can optimize by completely removing it, and I wouldn't even suffer much from it. But I would prefer to actually keep the PayPal pay buttons on the page. So yeah. All right, 82 on. Okay, here I get 82 now, and I was getting 100 before. So go figure. That's like the most frustrating thing for me is like with this page speed, and when I mentioned that it's not a good like it's not a good metric to use because first of all it give you random scores based on all the parameters with how it's checking on the server response times and everything. You just mostly want to use it as a guide because it gives you information, and if you check it on different pages on a longer period of time scale, if you take the average, you can kind of understand where your page is going. But this one-time runs of the specifically the lighthouse, not checking the core web vitals, which is not available for my site yet, it just gives you a bad. Just it can throw you off completely. So don't focus on that. What's next for me? Yeah, so I should wrap it up for today. Tomorrow probably more structured, whether more structured in terms of just going over each point, or for tomorrow I might choose the roast. I still not decided because I would ideally want additional sites to roast. I mean Francesco's site is not much to roast honestly, but a couple pointers where you can move on, where you can move it with forward, like move forward with, and for I think for Miguel's side there'll probably be a little bit more. I think his site has been around for a while, and he still has issues. And I might also pick some specific site, whether that's from the community, like small bets community, whether that's from like indie community, whether that's like just maybe even some more recognizable name. Generally, I might pick one of those sites and also go over them. The same I did with Bloomberg, where I compared the US and EU sites. Yeah, that's it for me today. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in. I know that Francesco and Miguel tuned in. I know that Christian tuned in for a little bit in the beginning. And there was someone else who had tuned in for a bit, I think, as a viewer. But uh, but yeah, I'll. I didn't even post it on Blue Sky this time. I don't even know why I didn't. I didn't even post about the live streams coming. And it's not even like people making fun that no one's watching on Blue Sky. But the reason why I didn't post on Blue Sky wasn't because I didn't want to post it there. It was just I was kind of a little bit out of. Wasn't very focused on actually getting the live stream like done today. It's not intentional. I guess I just been little bit tired and overwhelmed with all the topics I've been covering and things I've been doing. Um, and it's also the Christmas season coming up, so I've been like just distracted, like doing this, like grabbing this and grabbing the presents, ordering something for Christmas, and planning also what I could be doing over some of the holidays, some of the family member arrangements, etc. Those things just kind of distracting me a little bit, but we got through the live stream at the end, and tomorrow, and I actually have some video content. I'm actually very happy that I got some video content from the live stream that I know I can actually share as very short videos. Maybe not directly cut out of the live stream, but I can actually reuse more or less the same script, even if I need to re-record the voice and video parts, maybe. Still, really good. So thank you guys for tuning in. I see you tomorrow. I will obviously other some of you I guess I'll see also in the small bits community. I'll focus a little bit uh I'll focus a little bit more on getting some of the written content out as well. Not sure if I get one out today. Maybe I will. I wanted to also write up a little bit more on each individual metric and then also other tools, because today I went to the PageSpeed Insights. You can always use GT metrics. There's some other ping and page performance tools that help you like understand the metrics. I generally don't find actually that as useful. The GT metrics is probably the most useful out of all, and everyone's usually seems to be checking their site with GT metrics. Although, as I already said with the Bloomberg example, it doesn't showcase you that issue with time to first byte often as well. Like it because when it shows you all the ways you can optimize it, this time to first byte or the server response is usually such a small it's just one line on that report. But actually, the impact of it might actually be 50% of what's relevant and 50% of what's actually optimizable time. Like if you to go from like 3-second load time to 2.5, which passes Core Web Vitals, uh, like to go those 500 milliseconds, it could be that that time to first byte is literally 50% of that optimization, but it's only one line on the report. But you're actually would be optimizing all those JavaScript things and everything, and there's so many things you could do and explore, and sometimes simply just one long database query on the server side that could actually be optimized, or usage of a cache that completely would resolve that issue, and you would just get those 500 milliseconds off of the load time, right? That's the huge difference that those reports, they generally focus on client side, but a lot of the issues are server side. Not a lot, but they are just put under a single line under a report, although there might be different issues on the server side, whether that's like slow database queries, bad cache optimization, not using CDN or whatever for some resources that are loading slowly from your server. Your like your basically app. You could say like your app. The strategy of serving the app to the user, whether that's like SSR, like uh, server-side rendering, whether that's like SPA, the single page application, whether that's static generated app like SSG, whatever you use, it obviously will impact that performance also on the server side. So while on the report it simply appears as one line most of the time, in reality it might actually be the most important and sometimes even the easiest thing to optimize. Because with those JavaScripts and everything, like everything is depending on the device, individual device speed. But on the server side, it's mostly dependent on your server speed and whether you care about deploying on some kind of edge locations, etc. So it's actually closer to the user, which reduces like the first like that connection to your server for a request. That's like again, this is another topic. This is another topic I can cover. Another topic I already technically covered with the Bloomberg example, but this is the topic I can actually cover in depth and explain how that relevance on the server side versus client side. On a report that you normally use might appear as one line or just a couple small lines, but actual impact and the ability for you to optimize those things might be significantly higher. So yeah, that's it for me today. I almost made it to 2-hour mark, but I'm not focusing on getting the 2-hour mark today. I'm just happy I got through the stream. I now have a little bit of client work to do for one of those links I have behind me, desters.me/insights. You can't actually order it. It's out of stock right now. But it's something I need to get done. I have to finish a report for one of the clients there. Provide some insights for a project where they're losing potentially hundreds of thousands of clicks a month right now. And I kind of came up with a strategy. I just had to do a little bit more research, and I still need to conclude some of those research things and then just provide a strategy that I think confidently that could resolve most of the issues for losing the clicks and basically recovering hopefully most of the traffic that they have lost. And that's my focus for today, I guess. And after that, I'll review content for tomorrow and the rest of the days, both live streaming and the written content and everything else that I want to bring up. Yeah. This was a good try.